Okay, good evening, everyone. We are on page 376, and we are discussing Bitul Hametz, and Bitul is nullification. We're going to nullify the Hametz. And in a normal year, this is done on after the Bedika, after the search on the night of the 14th. And again, right after the Biur, after the destruction of the Hametz on the morning of the 14th. As we said last time, when it comes to the Bedika for Hametz, the search for Hametz, this year, because it's Erev Shabbat, we're not doing it on the night of the 14th. We're doing it on the night of the 13th. We're going to be doing it on Thursday night. The Bitul, the nullification, will take place right after that search. But the second bitul does not take place on Friday morning when we'll burn our chametz. Rather, it will be done on Shabbat morning once we've finished eating the last of our chametz with Shabbat. And I'll explain all of that once we go through these sources here. Okay? So, the Gemara says in Psachim Vav Amud Bet, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda said the name of Rav. Habodek, one who searches for the chametz, tzarich sheyivatel. He must also do the nullification. Okay, so the bedika is part one, and part two is this bitul. Says the Gemara, my taima, what is the reason? If we say it's because we're concerned about crumbs, ha lo chashive. Don't need to worry about crumbs because they're not significant. They're not important. So if it's not about crumbs, then what is the concern? Amar Rava, Rava said, Gezerah shema yimatze gluska yafe v'date ilave. What's the concern? Perhaps someone will find a beautiful loaf and his thoughts literally will be upon it, i.e., it will be, he won't want to destroy it, he won't want to remove it, and therefore he'll be in violation of owning chametz on Pesach. Says the Gemara, v'chi mishkachat le levatle. But let him nullify it when he finds it. Why do I need to have this whole thing of annulling it before? Says the Gemara, Dilma mishkachat le lebata isura. No, the concern is that he will only find the loaf of bread after the prohibition for owning chametz has taken place, i.e., after the 6th hour of the day. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. Lav bishute kaima. An alternative, and also it's because he won't be able to nullify it because it won't be in his possession. And if it's not in his possession, then he won't be he won't be able to nullify it. The Amar Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Elazar said, Shnei devarim, there are two things, enan bishuto shel adam, which are not in a person's possession. But the Torah considers them as if they are in your possession. The Eluhen, and these are they, bor b'shut harabim, if one left a pit in the public domain, v'chametz mishesh shaot ulamala, and someone who owns chametz after 6 hours of the 14th day and later. Even if those two are not in your possession, we consider them in your domain. We consider them yours, and so therefore you would be punished. Okay, if I was the one who dug the pit, even though it's not in my possession, I made that pit, I'm punished for it. Same too. If I find chametz after the time when it becomes prohibited, I am in trouble, unless I do this nullification. So our rabbis tell us, after you do the bedika, after you do the search for Hametz, immediately after, you need to nullify it. Okay? That's the Gemara. If you see the summary here, according to the Gemara, the purpose of bitul is to ensure that any chametz that was not discovered during the bedika, but was found later on, is already rendered worthless before Pesach begins, as after that, one can no longer do so. What exactly is the meaning of the bitul? The literal translation in English is nullification. But what is the exact meaning of the concept? This question is a subject to dispute among the Rishonim. Rashi holds that it mentally deciding that the chametz is worthless. He says here, bitul ba'alma, dichtiv tashbitu, you shall remove it. Veloktiv, but it doesn't say taviru, that you shall destroy it. Hashvata delevhi hashvata. What are we saying here? That you shall remove it in your heart. That is what's considered the removal. Whereas, so again, according to Rashi, the Torah has created a chidush here, where one can simply mentally declare the chametz is worthless, and it is then indeed takes effect. But according to Tosfot, the bitul is making it hefker. I want to make it ownerless, as it says here, v'omer ri, and the ri says, the midoraita, on a Torah level, bebitul ba'alma, sagi mitam de ma'achar shivatlu, have a hefker, v'yatsa mirshuto. What's going on here? On a Torah level, how does it work? The reason is that since one has nullified it, it makes it hefker, ownerless, and it's as if it's left his possession. So even though it's in your house, I've made it hefker, and so it's ownerless. Umutar, and it is therefore permitted, not permitted for me to eat it, but permitted if it would be found after the fact, and I'm not aware, I've not transgressed owning of having chametz in my possession or seeing it. Okay, as it says, you may see what belongs to others and to God. Abal ata ro'eh shel acherim v'shel gavoa. So in addition to the bitul declaration recited at night following the bedika, a second one is also recited on the morning of the 14th at the time of the burning of the chametz. Okay? And by the way, we're going to get into this, as I said, for those who just tuned in, how we do it differently this year. But just here right now, we're talking about the classical approach. So the classical, in a normal year, I did my bedika on the night of the 14th. I searched. Then I make this nullification, this bitul. And then on the 14th during the day, I burn it, and then I make a second nullification declaration. And this is codified by Shulchan Aruch. Maran says, Achar ha-bedika, miyad balayla, ivatlenu. So after the search, immediately, at nighttime, after that nighttime search, one immediately makes this declaration. It says, Kal chamira, Ashkenazim say kol, Kal chamira di'ite b'shuti, de la chazite, u de la biarte, levatil v'lehevek afra da'ara. Okay, something we're all familiar with. All chametz that is in my possession, that I have not seen, and that I have not burned, should be nullified and should be like the dust of the earth. V'tov lachzor, ulevatlo pamacher b'yom yudalet, sof sha'a chamishit. And it's good to go back and make this nullification a second time on the 14th during the day at the end of the 5th hour. Kodem shetagia sha'a shishit, before the 6th hour arrives, shemeshetagia sha'a shishit ne'ersav ein biyado levatlo. Because once it's reached that stage of the 6th hour, it is then prohibited, and one can no longer nullify it, and one is aware, one has transgressed the prohibition of owning chametz. on a Torah level. And so that's why we always have this careful thing. Make sure you nullify it by this time. Make sure you burn it by this time. Make sure you do your bidikah this time, all those times. Finish eating. We want to make sure that we're not over, we're not transgressing either eating or owning chametz at a time. Normally when people give zmanim, times for when to do things, we normally go by the most lenient shita. I don't know if you've ever looked at halachic zemanim, and look at times, and often there'll be a whole range of, this is the time that you can say the Shema, until this time, here's the time that you can say the Amidah, and there are always later options. And but when it comes to chametz, I always write the earliest possible time. So let's say there's a range, and it says, the time to burn the time to finish eating chametz this year, I have 10:37. Some rabbis have 10:44. Some others have 10:52. We go with the most strict. Why? Because I don't want to be anywhere close to eating chametz past the time. Same thing with burning the chametz. I have 11:56. I already saw someone has 12:02. Someone else has 12:08. The reason of the earlier time is we want to make sure that is what's considered the end of the 5th hour and the beginning of the 6th. Okay? So the Rama then adds, "Ve'ein levatlo bayom ela la'achar shesaraf hachametz." And you don't do this bitul, says the Rama, until after you've finished burning the chametz. Kedei lekayem mitzvat sreifat b'chametz shelo. Okay, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of burning with chametz that belongs to you. If you've already done the nullification, then that chametz that you're burning isn't yours. So you don't get the mitzvah of destroying the chametz. And so therefore, if I want to do biur chametz, I need to own it. And so therefore, that's the minhag, both Ashkenazim and Sfaradim, even though it's brought in the Ramah, the minhag is you don't say the bitul until after you have finished burning or destroying the chametz.
I have a question.
Yes.
So basically, when one travels, let's say they're going to travel Thursday and they have to be at the airport at 7. So basically you could do it like at 6 or earlier. What's the...
Which bit, the searching or the destroying?
The day of Erev Pesach, when you burn the chametz. So instead of at 10:40, that's at 10:45. You can, let's say you set it at 10:45. So that's the latest, but you can do it earlier.
Absolutely. If you're ready and good, let's say this is not a normal year of, let's say it's not this year of Erev Shabbat and everything else. If it's a normal year, you can finish burning your chametz early. I often do that. On a normal year, I will burn my chametz as soon as everyone's done with breakfast. I burn the chametz and say my kal chamira. I want to be done straight away. I don't want to have any question of doubt of leaving it to the last second, because if you leave it to the last second, you know, things come up, and soon you're needed for something else and you forget. But that's what I do. I make sure that I've done all that I need to do. And then we make sure we've sold everyone's chametz, and then I do it. But again, I want to talk about this year. I just want to see a couple more sources. I'm going to explain for what we do this year. So the Penenei Halacha, that's by Rav Eliezer Melamed, he explains why we do it twice. The bitul, why isn't it not just enough doing it once? And he writes, even though we've already nullified the chametz on the night of the 14th after the search, mikol makom, nevertheless, oto habitul haya al hachametz shelo noda velo nimtza bebidika. The whole thing was that nullification was over the chametz, which was not known and was not found in the search. Aval et hachametz shemitkavnim le'echol ba'arochat erev, but the chametz which he intended to eat that evening, and also the chametz he intended to eat in the morning, lo nitan levatlo. He didn't intend to nullify it, because it's important to us. because we're going to eat it. It's going to be the food that we eat. וכן, את החמץ שנמצא בבדיקה, and similarly, the chametz which was found in the search, lo mevatlim, we don't nullify them either. Sharei mitkavnim lahashbito b'sreifa, because we're going to use them to destroy them when we burn them. Lefichach, therefore, balayla at night, anu mevatlim, what are we nullifying? Rak et hametz shelo matzanu b'bedika, only the chametz which we do not find with the search. Aval, ein anu mitkavnim levatel et hametz she'anu shomrim avur aruchot hanotzarot usreifat hachametz. But we're not coming to nullify the chametz which we are guarding, which we're going to eat in the remaining meals until we burn it. Lefichach, therefore, yitachein, it's possible, shemiktzat min hachametz hazeh nishmat me'inyano v'nishkach. It's possible that some of this chametz slipped away from our eyes and was forgotten about. And in order not to violate Bal Yerai and Bal Yimatzeh, of being seen and being found in one's possession, therefore we go back and nullify it for a second time. Thank God for the rabbis for looking out for us and making sure we didn't do that. Because you could imagine, I'm going to look after this mad, I know, and it's specifically this case this year where I am very careful. I am nullifying on the night, on Thursday night, everything which I did not find. But I'm not nullifying what? The chalot, which I'm going to eat on Friday night and Shabbat morning. So it's very careful. However, if I didn't do a second nullification, what might happen? One of my careful daughters might take one of the chalot and move it away. I thought it was already flushed down the toilet. Instead, it was just put away on the one side. And suddenly, I'm owning chametz on Pesach, or owning chametz after the 6th hour. And so therefore the second nullification covers that eventuality. It's almost perfect for this year. Although, as you mentioned earlier, according to the Torah, either bitul or burning the chametz alone suffices, and is not necessary to do both, the Mishnah Berurah explains that Chazal require us to do both. And the reason being that they want to make sure that there's no possibility of us getting stuck. And it says here, perhaps because people are used to having it all year, it is in his house and in his possession, we decree to search for it lest you forget and come to eat it. And so therefore, the rabbis, because it's something which is so ubiquitous and it's so normal for us, we have to be very careful to make sure we do not inadvertently keep chametz by mistake, okay? Now, how do we destroy the chametz? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein biur chametz, ela b'sreifa. The only way to destroy the chametz is to burn it. V'hachamim omrim, but our rabbis say, af mefarer v'zoreh leruach. No, you can even crumble it and sprinkle it into the wind. Or matil layam, or cast it into the sea. The Shulchan Aruch, how does he make the ruling here? Ketzad biur chametz, how do you do it? Sarfa, you can burn it, or parara, or you can sprinkle it into the wind, v'zoreh leruach, or zorkoloyam, or sprinkle it into the sea. V'im haya chametz kasher, and if the chametz was hard, v'ein hayam machtacho b'mhera, and the sea will not cut it up quickly, then he should break it up, crumble it before throwing it into the sea. The Ramah says, v'haminhag, but the custom is l'sarfar, is to burn it. V'tov l'sarfar bayom, and it's good to burn it during the day. Dumya de notar, because it's like the concept of notar, of leftover meat, which is forbidden to be eaten from a sacrifice. Shaya nisraf bayom, that it was burned during the daytime. However, imratzah l'sarfar, miyad acha b'dika, if someone wanted to burn the chametz immediately after the search because they're not planning on eating any chametz afterwards, or kadei shelo yigrarenu chulda, or they're worried that perhaps a weasel will come and drag some chametz away and then leave it behind somewhere else. Harashut biyado, he has the permission to do so. In footnote 20 there, it just says to you there's another option there other than destroying your chametz. Obviously, we have is to sell one's chametz to a non-Jew, and we'll talk about that later on. V'haminhag l'srofar, and the custom, at least in Ashkenaz, but taken on by most communities, is to burn it. The choshishin, because we are concerned l'data poskim, to those poskim shepasku k'Rabbi Yehuda, who hold that we should have ruled like Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar ein biur chametz ela serifa, that the only way of being fulfilled the biur chametz is to burn it. The afinan min notar shu b'sreifa, because we learn it out from notar, from leftover meat, which must be burnt as a sacrifice, as leftover sacrifice. So too we must burn the chametz. And the Mishnah Berurah says, he quotes the Maharil, another reason why it's better to burn it during the day, so that one will thereby remember to make the second declaration of bitul that we do during the day. And we burn it during the 5th hour, since one must nullify it afterwards, and in the 6th hour, it's no longer in his possession to nullify it. If one has hoshanot, and this is some people have the custom to do this, it is good to burn the chametz with the hoshanot, since it was used for one mitzvah. It should be used well for the mitzvah of destroying the chametz, and many people have that minhag to use either the hoshanot or the lulav to burn to use as fuel to burn their chametz. Now, what's important to understand this year is because things are a little different. As I said, the first things first, instead of searching on Friday night, which is the night of the 14th, we're going to search on Thursday night, which is the night of the 13th. Then on the day of the 13th, which is Friday morning, we're going to burn the chametz like normal. However, what happens? We don't make the bitul. There's no nullification after we burn the chametz. Why? Because we're still going to enjoy and eat chametz for the 2 meals of Shabbat, Friday night and Shabbat morning. We're going to have an early Shabbat morning tefillah, and then we're going to have an early Shabbat morning snack. That's going to be before 10:37. And then after that meal is concluded, then I do bitul. But before I do that bitul, any possible chametz that I might have, I need to get rid of. And I can do that by flushing it down the toilet, which is the way that I recommend, and making sure it's small crumbs if there is any, and flushing it down the toilet. Or I can go and put it in the garbage. But I can only put it in the garbage if I use the eruv. If I don't use the eruv, then I cannot do that. So the main way for Sfaradim to use it is to put it down the toilet. Okay, flush it, and then after it's flushed, to then say that second bitul. Okay, so this year we do the search, then the first bitul. On Friday we burn it, but don't say anything afterwards. Friday night and Shabbat morning we have challah, and then whatever crumbs are left over we flush down the toilet, and then after that we make the second bitul.
Okay, so I have a question here.
Yes, Sarah.
Okay, so we're leaving for Memphis on Thursday morning. So when would we do the bitul? So we do the bitul before we leave, but then when do we say?
So here's Sarah. Here's what you should do. You should search for the chametz
Right.
on Wednesday night without a beracha.
Without. And then Thursday, when we get rid of the chametz?
And then Thursday, you're going to get rid of the chametz on probably on Shabbat because you'll be with your kids, right?
Well, okay.
You're not going to bring anything with you, but you're still going to enjoy Hametz on Friday night and Shabbat morning.
Right.
So when you do it with your children, you'll do the bitul with them.
Okay.
So what you'll do is you'll search without a bracha on Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Then when you get to your children on Thursday night, they'll search the house and make the bracha and make the bitul. And then you'll be with them when they burn the chametz on Friday, and then Friday night and Shabbat. You'll do everything in Memphis except for searching your own home before you leave on Wednesday night without a bracha.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the key to what's going on here. I cannot and I should not make that nullification early, because I'm going to enjoy the chametz, unless my goal is to do something which is brought down in the Gemara and brought down by Hacham Avaji Yosef, and that is, I don't want to eat chametz on Friday night and Shabbat, because my whole house is already ready for Pesach, and I don't want crumbs, and it's going to drive my wife crazy or whoever else crazy. And so therefore, I'm not going to have any chametz in my home. If that's the scenario, what are you going to eat for bread? In that scenario, you can take matzah and then cook it or fry it. So it changes the shape and form, but it's still considered bread. That works for Sfaradim. Ashkenazim can have egg matzah. The problem with egg matzah for Sfaradim is when it's not Pesach, it only gets the bracha of borei minei mezanot. So it doesn't work for Sfaradim for those two meals. For Sfaradim, I have two options. Regular challah, which is chametz. But the downside, you might drive your wife crazy by having chametz when everything is ready for Pesach. Your other option is having this fried or cooked matzah. The downside to it is it's extremely strange. No one ever does it. The Gemara tells us that you don't eat matzah on Erev Pesach because it's like having marital relations with your fiance the day before you get married. You don't do that. You wait till you're married. You're going to have Pesach the night, you're going to have matzah the night of Pesach. You don't have it the day before. So even though it's cooked or fried and it's very different, it's still strange because it's similar enough. The Ashkenazim have a much easier thing. For them, matzah is always, even if it's egg matzah, they would still make hamotzi over it. And so therefore, they could eat that for Friday night, for Shabbat morning, and also for Shabbat afternoon. What's the downside for them? Same problem. Egg matzah, although you don't eat it for Seder, it's very similar to regular matzah. And some people, although you can do it that way, it feels strange. So what am I going to do? I'm going to eat on my deck, and I'm going to have either pitot or very small challah rolls. I'll eat it in a bag, and then whatever's left over, I'll put in the toilet. And then for Sudah Shlishit, I'll have snacks, fruit, vegetables, maybe some fish, maybe some chicken, but something light. I'm not going to worry about my carbs and my grains. I just don't need it. We'll survive that way. But that's how the halachic nature of making sure is I didn't make that nullification before I want to eat my Shabbat bread. Because if I made the nullification, how am I eating the Shabbat bread? One has to understand what it is exactly that I'm doing when I'm nullifying what I'm nullifying. I'm nullifying that bread's existence. If that bread doesn't exist, I can't then enjoy it as my hamotzi on Shabbat. Okay? Whereas if I say, no, I want to nullify it because I'm not going to eat it. What am I going to eat on Shabbat? I'm going to eat this fried matzah or this cooked matzah. It's going to be strange, but you could do it. Now, what is the minhag here? The minhag in Seattle, as far as I could ascertain, is that we do have hamotzi in the chametz form for the first two meals, and for Sudar Shlishit, the custom, although you can do matzah shira, is generally to abstain, not because you can't have it, but because you want to have that special taste of matzah on Pesach. So again, you 100% can have matzah shira for Sudar Shlishit. However, it doesn't work because I want to have that close taste. Now that's for Sfaradim. For Ashkenazim, the opposite. They could have matzah shira, this egg matzah, for Friday night and Shabbat morning, but when it comes to Shabbat afternoon, they don't want to eat that. They want to have something else. They want to have the fish, the fruit, the vegetables, or perhaps something, or they'll have kanedelach. They'll have cooked matzah meal, but they don't want to have it in egg matzah. Why? The Rama says that you can't eat egg matzah except if you are sick or old. That's for Ashkenazim, whereas for Sfaradim, we say you can't use it for the mitzvah of hamotzi, but you can eat egg matzah during Pesach. Okay? Any questions about how we do our preparations before Pesach this year? Straightforward? I hope so. I mean, it's not straightforward, but it's straightforward enough if you follow the written guidelines. The Gemara says here, what happens if you were to find Hametz on Pesach? So you've done everything that you can. You've done your search, you've done your nullification, you're enjoying Yom Tov, and you find some Hametz. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Hamotzeh Hametz beveitov. Someone finds Hametz in his home, B'Yom Tov, on the holiday, Kofer alav et hakeli. He needs to cover it with a vessel. Why? Because at that stage, it's mukseh, and one cannot destroy it or touch it or roll it or move it because it's already in a state. So you have to leave it there. That's for when it's on Yom Tov or Shabbat. Why? Rashi explains, it's not fitting to move it, and take it out, because it's mukseh. Mihu lo avar, you haven't transgressed seeing the chametz in your possession. Why? Because you nullified it in your heart the day before. As we said above, one who searches for chametz needs to nullify it in his heart. And one who searches must nullify in his heart, and rather turning over utensil is required, so one does not forget and come to eat it by mistake. And the Shulchan Aruch rules, Hamotzeh chametz beveito, one who finds chametz in his home, imhu bechol hamoed, if it's during the medianos, yotzienu v'yivarenu miyad, one can take it out and destroy it immediately. V'imhu yom tov, but if it's yom tov, yichaper alav keli ad halayla, you cover it with a vessel until nighttime, and then you destroy it. Because you can't move it on Yom Tov. And you can't burn it in its place either. And why can't you burn it? Because although you're allowed to cook on Yom Tov, that's because you're making something. You're making food. It's ochel nefesh. But to destroy something, you're not allowed to do. Okay. It's an interesting sheila here, which is, what if you find chametz but you've already sold your chametz? Are you allowed to destroy it or not? He says here, if the chametz was sold, then the chametz found has the status of chametz owned by a Gentile that is found in the property of a Jew without him accepting responsibility for it, for which on Yom Tov one should place a utensil on top of it. And on the Chol HaMoed, one should make a separation of 10 handbreadths, i.e. you just need to move it. You're not allowed to destroy it because it belongs to the non-Jew. Okay, the halacha is also different. One finds chametz in the street or in the public area. In that case, one should not touch it for any reason, as the moment the one picks it up, he acquires and therefore violates the prohibition of bal yira'eh. This is explained by the Biur Halacha, citing the Rivash. And this is specifically in Israel, where this is in Israel specifically. But also you, even here, if you to pick it up, you're acquiring it. So the Biur Halacha says, Katav HaRav Yitzchak ben Sheshet, the Rivash, in Taf Aleph, Matzah chametz b'shut harav. If you found chametz in the public domain, asur lo lahagbiho. It is forbidden for him to pick it up. The misha'ah shehagbiho, because the time that you raise it, kena'o, you acquire it, v'over alav b'val yira'eh, and you transgress the prohibition of it being seen in your possession. Afilu ein datol is chutba, and even if that wasn't your intent to acquire it, you lifted it up only to remove it, from a place where people are passing through, so they should not stumble by it. It's still prohibited as well. Okay, so you got to be very careful. You find chametz, do not pick it up. Okay, because once you pick it up, if it's in the public streets, it's as if you are taking ownership over it. Okay, to finish off, I'm not going to go into too many details because you can read this on your own. There is, as I said, it's ubiquitous nowadays that we sell our chametz. However, this was not the practice done by our forefathers. It became something which was established for merchants and traders, which has now become commonplace for everyone. The goal in the old time was you would break down your chametz until you had nothing left, and some people still do that. At least I try to do that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Last year there was a big concern about being able to have chametz after Pesach. So I think for the first time in a long time, I sold chametz. But normally I do try to get rid of it as much as possible. And if I sell, it's only out of doubt to make sure there wasn't something that I missed. But here, Rav Kenningsberg goes into the origins of Mechirat Chametz. And he says as follows. Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin, in his Mo'adim Ba'alacha, traces the development of the custom of Mechirat Chametz through 4 historical periods. The earliest mention of the idea of selling Chametz to a non-Jew is found in the Mishnah, where it says during the hour that one may eat chametz, he may feed it to animals and birds or sell it to a non-Jew. The Gemara explains that the Mishnah comes to support the opinion of Beit Hillel that this sale is permitted even close to the onset of Pesach, when it's clear that chametz will not be consumed before the Chag. What emerges clearly from the Mishnah and Gemara is a description of a regular transaction like any other between buyer and seller. During the next stage, the sale retains its authentic form, in that the non-Jewish buyer received his merchandise and the Jewish seller received his payment. However, both were aware that the chametz would be purchased, so it would be repurchased by the Jew at the conclusion of the Chag. The Tosefta brings the case of a Jew and a non-Jew who are together on a ship on Erev Pesach and allows for the Jew to sell his chametz to the non-Jew even when he plans to repurchase it after Pesach, so long as he performs a valid sale. Seemingly, this model is the basis of the halacha in the Shulchan Aruch, which sanctions the sale of a chametz to a non-Jew. Nonetheless, the impression formed by the Tosefta is of a spontaneous sale on a case-by-case basis, far from the pre-organized ritual that exists today. Several hundred years ago, the sale began to take on a more formal and even disingenuous appearance. Many of the Jews of Europe earned their livelihood through the manufacture of alcoholic beverages, such as whiskey, which constitute chametz. In addition, the chametz not used in the manufacture of the beverages would be used to feed their animals. The disposal of the chametz before Pesach would entail great monetary loss, and so the prearranged sale of chametz began to take shape. The chametz would remain in the home of the Jew, and the non-Jew's ownership of it became more of a legal technicality than a tangible reality. In order to downplay the somewhat fictitious appearance and strengthen the authenticity of the sale, The signing of a document of sale became an integral part of the process as well. The sale was performed on an individual basis by members of the community. The complex nature of the sale described above, whereby the sold Hametz remained in the home of the seller, led to a large number of cases where its halachic validity was called into question. Cases are recorded whereby the seller forgot to sign his name on the document, or whereby the Hametz was sold after the time had already become forbidden. The fact that many of those executing the sale were ignorant of the relevant halachot meant that while they thought they had sold their Hametz, it remained fully in their possession. As a result, the practice which continued to this day was established. The local Beit Din, or the local rabbi, would arrange a collective sale for all members of the community. Originally, this sale took on the form of a collective sale of Hametz to the Rav, who would then sell it to the non-Jew. Later, this was changed to our current practice, where the rabbi does not himself purchase the Hametz, but rather acts as an agent for the sale of the Hametz belonging to the members of the community to the non-Jew. Okay, so that's the history. Why is it so controversial? Despite its widespread nature, the evolution of the sale into the form in which it exists today was not without controversy. The sale was and remains seen by many as a deliberate form of harama, deception. The Bechor Shor writes that Mechirat Hametz is undoubtedly to be considered harama, since the buyer never really intended to provide payment or purchase his goods, and the seller too never seriously planned to give up ownership. Consequently, the sale will be ineffective regarding the biblical prohibition of Hametz, and that is why those who are careful try whatever possible not to sell their Hametz. The Bechor Shor writes that the sale is nonetheless valid under certain circumstances, since after performing bitul, the prohibition of Hametz is only rabbinic. Remember, my nullification has made it only rabbinic. Yet this approach raises even more question. If the bitul is to be taken seriously, how can one sell that which he has already nullified? You know, I can't say it's dust of the earth if I want to sell it. So, here's the problem. I'm going to question that. That's my get out of jail free card in case I find Hametz on Pesach. If the bitul is meant to be done after the sale, if the sale is to be taken seriously, how can one affect the legal status of that which is not in his possession? And so therefore it goes back to being d'oraita. The Bechor Shor, as a leading halakhic authority of his day, could not be taken lightly. However, his opinion was ultimately rejected by the majority of the poskim. Some argued that since the sold Hametz was by definition excluded from the bitul, any mechirat Hametz would be coming to prevent a biblical transgression. Others claim that mechirat Hametz is not to be considered harama at all, since theoretically the non-Jew could complete his payment and take up ownership of his newly bought goods, so long as the buyer and seller genuinely agree on the sale and all other technical aspects are done properly. There is no reason not to consider the sale authentically binding. Now, I just did that to give you a little bit of a taste. You can read to it as much as you want on your own. Modern technology, now we do the sales online. So there's not even the format of doing a kinyan, of acquiring. We just do, so that kind of lessens it. But sometimes people make a donation online to help with it. But you can see here, conclusions. Should we rely on the sale or not? As we have seen, the custom of selling Hametz is not without its controversy or complications. The Vilna Gaon writes not to perform any sale of Hametz which the seller intends to repurchase. The appearance of harama and the difficulty in finding a valid ma'aseh kinyan are two of the most significant factors which have led several of the Achronim to question the validity of the practice. As a result of these concerns, many are stringent and choose not to rely on the sale for items which are Hametz Gamor. Yet, even among those who are stringent for themselves, many will purchase Hametz after Pesach from those who do rely on this sale. In this context, we can draw two distinctions. Number one, a great monetary loss is an important consideration in deciding the halacha. So the sale of Hametz may be improper for the individual consumer, yet acceptable for large supermarket chains. The possession of Hametz during Pesach involves the infringement of biblical prohibitions, as we have seen. By contrast, the ban on deriving benefit from Hametz, which was owned by a Jew on Pesach, is a rabbinic penalty, and as such, there is more room for leniency. The custom of selling Hametz has become entrenched in Jewish communities around the world as an integral part of the preparations of Pesach. And those who rely on the sale certainly have valid halachic grounds for doing so. The custom developed not in order to replace the physical destruction of the Hametz in our possession, but in order to help those who found themselves in position of great monetary loss to fulfill the halacha nonetheless. With proper planning and forethought in the weeks leading up to Pesach, we can ensure that we all arrive at the Chag Hametz free. So you can see from that where it's clearly lining up that if you can, only sell what you have to. Try not to sell Hametz Gamor, actual Hametz. Don't be selling pasta and bread and the like. But understand who this is for. It's meant to be for those who have huge financial losses. It's not for us every day. All that withstanding, one should not feel bad if one does so. But I would say, generally, I try to encourage as many people as possible to sell who wouldn't normally sell and would go into Pesach and just hide their food. You can't hide your food. You have to get rid of it or sell it. If you can't get rid of it, sell it. So I try to do something that's called Mezakeh Terabim. I try to do something for the benefit of the members. And what I do is I try to sell all of the SBH members, whether they know it or not. And that's a Mezakeh for those who wouldn't normally sell. But for those who know the halacha and don't want to be in a position of selling it, no problem, because they have already finished and removed all the Hametz that they have. So that's it for me on Hametz. Are there any questions? Okay, so that'll be it for tonight.